I was a teenager, my brother went to prom and I was like sad because I didn't have a date. So my parents took me to the movies. And my mother took me, thanks mom, she took me to see Insidious and I had nightmares for weeks. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming back. For those of you who don't know, my name is Mickey. I'm a therapist. We talk about therapy things on this channel because I love to talk about mental health. And I guess I've just made it my personality now. Those of you who are returning here, this setup is new. We had to rearrange my office so that I can work from home more efficiently. So I hope that you like it. If you don't like it, be nice, please. Also, today is different for a bunch of other reasons too, because we have Hannah here. She's one of my original internet friends. She's my favorite. She has a YouTube channel also. Her channel's linked in the description, but it's called Hannah the Horrible. She talks about mysteries and true crime and creepy and disturbing things. A series that I have been watching on her channel lately is an ARG on TikTok that has been super, super fun. I don't have the guts to watch them on TikTok, but I like watching them on Hannah's channel because it makes them less scary. So if you like creepy and disturbing or mysterious or interesting things, definitely go check out her channel. For today's video, we did a part 1 on her channel talking about Dawn Spirit. For those of you who don't know, Dawn Spirit is a little bit of a heavy subject. This is the first time that we're kind of taking a step into true crime. So I want to be real clear from the jump. We have a trigger warning for all the things we are talking about: murder and death by suicide, and sex work and stigma around sex work, child death, child abuse, family abuse, serious mental illness, and a whole host of other things. So if you are sensitive to those issues, please know this is not the video for you. Love you the most. Watch one of our other therapist reacts videos and we'll see you next week. Like I mentioned before, we did a part 1 on Hannah's channel talking about all of the details of the case. So we're not going to recap that too much here. If you want to know who Dawn Spirit is, why we're talking about it, or the details of the case, go to her channel, check that out. Also subscribe to Hannah because she's great. We talked in your video about how Dawn Spirit, as far as we're aware, was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And we talked a little bit about how he was not medicated at the time and was also a drug user. And I wanted to talk with you because you cover true crime, obviously, more than I do, about how often you see this showing up in terms of mental illness and the co-occurring substance abuse and substance use and all of that stuff.
Frequently is the short answer. The long answer, yeah. In my opinion, I don't think you can be mentally sound and just kill somebody and take another life, even if you feel horrible about taking another life. I think if you're mentally healthy, if you took another life on accident, it would eat you up for the rest of your life, you know? So I think to intentionally kill somebody, I think you have to something has got to be not quite right, in my opinion. Whether, not always a sociopath or a psychopath. So, but then I go back to what I always struggle with is that, they may frequently have some sort of mental health struggle, but also what about everybody that has the same mental health struggle and they don't kill anybody? And I think that's important to note, just because bipolar disorder and schizophrenia specifically, pretty much nobody with schizophrenia is actually violent towards other people. They're usually a risk to themselves, which I would imagine you can confirm, right? They're actually not rarely violent towards other people. And I think there's a big stigma in pop culture and just in our society that if you're talking to yourself, then you're gonna just go bomb something or something like that. And that's actually very inaccurate. And those are actually the people you probably have to be the least afraid of, honestly.
Yes. Yeah.
Usually it's in sheep's clothing.
Yes, exactly. And actually, I think that dovetails really nicely with the next thing that we're going to talk about too, which is something that we also touched on in part 1, which is this concept of dyadic death. You asked me in part 1 about the phenomenon of murderers who then die by suicide after they've committed murder. And this was something that I didn't really know about. So I did some research and looked into it and kind of discovered this term, dyadic death, which talks about how oftentimes a person who dies by suicide after committing a murder views that process as an extended suicide. And we talked a little bit about how,
is that what dyadic death is killing somebody else and then killing you.
Yeah. But in order to do that, not that you have to be unwell, but that's not really something that people do when you're in that healthy place. And I think it's important to talk about that from the place of destigmatizing things, because when we treat people with mental illness like they're these crazy people who are like liable to fly off the handle and stab people in a Starbucks, that's why people don't want to go to therapy and get help
Right.
and talk about what's going on, And so I think it really begs the question, like, how much more stable or like calm Don's spirit might have been if he had had the appropriate resources and access and not been like subject to this stigma, and like had the intervention that he needed.
Yeah, and I always think about too how like people that are like diagnosed sociopaths that really cannot feel empathy, they've shown that a lot of them that doesn't automatically make them a murderer. They can
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
live in society and just not relate to people the way, and not and
Yes.
they have to live differently, but with like therapy and stuff and
Mhm.
understanding. Like I thought that was interesting. And I think a lot of,
Yep.
especially the way our media specifically, like if you're a sociopath, then you kill people easily.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Don was a sociopath or not, but I just find that particularly interesting that if he had had all the resources and he was,
Yeah.
taking his medication properly and maybe had more help and support from society and less stigma, would this have happened?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask you too about how often you have seen this phenomenon of parents who kill their children. And I mentioned this at the tail end of the part 1 video that we did on your channel, but I don't know how people who cover true crime and murder like talk about this shit all day, because it's just like very distressing, but especially like parental murder. Like I would imagine this comes up to a fair degree, but it just seems like a very distressing thing to talk about and to cover. And so I'm curious to know like your thoughts and your feelings about all of this, because you're in that world more than I am.
For me, my only trigger is animal cruelty.
Okay.
That's the only thing that I like will not like. If there's too much of that in a case, I won't. I won't. I just can't.
That's fair.
And there has, I will say there's been a couple cases where I've literally been like halfway through researching to make a video about, and it's crimes against children, and it's so bad that I have put it down and I've never picked it back up again because I cannot. The details of it will just make you like literally sick. Like I'm sitting there literally nauseous reading, and like people don't realize that when you make a video, and you can relate to this, when you make a video, you're not just researching it and filming it, you're researching it, reading the details over and over, reliving it all when you're filming it, and then when you edit it, you have to relive it, and then you have to find all the photos and the videos and stuff that go with it. So it's not like I'm just reading something on Wiki and putting it away. I'm reliving it many, many times.
Yes.
And so I think that's the challenge when you're covering true crime, is that there are some cases that are too horrendous to do. And then like we were talking about, it is often, can I just say that I looked up the statistic for if it's more likely, if moms or dads are killing their children. When we've talked about this before, I was actually wrong. So moms are actually more likely to kill their young children in infancy or before the age of like 8. And I'm guessing that has a lot to do with postpartum depression. That's my guess. And again, not having the resources to help.
Okay.
And then men are more likely to kill their children after they're 8 years old, like if they're a little bit older. So that might be older data. So I'm not positive that that's perfect, but that seems to be the trend.
Yeah.
Makes sense, because it does often seem like it's moms that are not getting the help they need when they're going through postpartum depression, whereas dads, it's like a property thing, like you were talking about like with Don, like it's like the children are their property and they need to take them down with them.
Yeah.
So that's it's without going into details about the cases that are just too horrific to cover. There are some that are just like, there's already lots, but I guess for me it's just, I'm just got such a morbid curiosity that like that's all all I do is all I want to watch is horror movies, and all I want to listen to is true crime. So I'm so fascinated by it that like it's not, you become desensitized after a while. You learn how to cope with it. And I always do, after reading like a case like this, I watch something happy and cheery before I go to bed, and I try to be a little bit. So
I actually, because I think it was maybe not last week, but the week before, you talked about that video that was circulating on TikTok, trigger warning for death and murder, but of that video where it was the girl dancing for like a split second and then it switched to that execution, and you talked about how you had watched that video, and I was like, oh my god, I actually told Aaron after I watched your video, I was like, I'm not fucking made for that shit, man. Like that's wild to me. But I guess that makes sense though, like if you like this is your job, you make this content, and
I can't make a video about something if I haven't seen what I'm talking about.
That's
like,
fair. Yeah, that makes sense.
So I do think about that though, and I worry about, am I exploiting? Am I furthering the exploitation of the person, the victim being killed by watching the video and stuff? Not that I'm downloading it or sharing it or anything.
Yeah.
I guess I also come back to just like humans. It's not a weird thing to be morbidly curious.
No, not at all.
I think it's not like I'm going to share it or anything like that. And I'm doing it so I can talk about why, to warn people about seeing it and stuff. And it's not like I'm the one that took the video or was participating.
Yeah.
So, but that's kind of how I figure, is like, I kind of have to watch in order to talk about it, or I don't really know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I guess it's just desensitized. It's sad though. I don't like, I do like, I don't know if
I don't think it's sad though. I mean, I think
no, the desensitization to violence I find concerning, not for me, because I feel like I do it for a specific reason, but I find every time I make a video like that, I have like kids come on my video and they'll be like, I'm 11, I saw it, it wasn't that big of a deal. Or I have a bunch of other kids that are like, my friend sent it to me without telling me what it was, and I saw it, and now I can't sleep. It's like either kids that are already really desensitized to it, or other kids that got tricked into watching it because they were either innocently on TikTok or one of their jerk friends, which I don't think they're really friends if they're trying to trick their friend, will see it, and then they're like literally like, help, I can't, like they're asking me who made the video about it, like I can't sleep, what do I do? That shit's hard because I'm 30, so I can get over seeing stuff like that. And it's like, I know it exists whether I see it or not. If I had seen that when I was a kid, I would have been ruined. I would not have seen it in weeks.
Well, and I think that's also like part of the use of the content that you make, is that, like I mentioned about the ARG series that you're doing, like I am way too much of a fucking baby to watch that shit in real time. And so it's nice to watch it on your channel. It like provides a nice buffer room where I can learn about it and enjoy that content, or like learn about that thing on TikTok.
Of it on my channel.
I think it's like a useful thing, and it's helpful too from like an information sharing perspective, because then I was like, okay, well, at least I know now that like if I see that girl in that outfit show up on my TikTok, like I'm scrolling away because I'm not here for that.
I have a lot of parents that watch my channel too. That, like, I mean, they're interested in the morbid stuff too, but then that they are informed of that kind of thing, so they can like kind of keep an eye on their kids for a while, because not that TikTok claims to be for young children, but I think it's like 13 plus. So
which is still young enough that that's disturbing content for a kid. You know?
And let me tell you how many people I got on that video that asked me for the video. Like lots of like hate comments that were just like, where's the video, idiot? I'm like, nobody's gonna share. Yeah, it's just so I wrote a pinned comment and I was like, stop asking me for the video, you guys. Nobody's going to post the video on YouTube because they get their channels taken down, or at least the video taken down. And then I said, if you're that desperate to see a video and you're looking on YouTube of all places, you probably don't have the emotional capacity to watch it anyway.
No, really though.
Dumb enough to be looking on YouTube for a video like that.
Yeah, you don't know what you're doing. Oh my God. Okay, sorry. I just realized I'm like personally interrogating you about your channel. I mean, I think I have a painting around here somewhere. Once upon a time, I was a murderino and listened to My Favorite Murder regularly, and I do like true crime and creepy stuff. I just don't, especially like horror movies and stuff like that, get under my skin. Like I remember when I was a teenager, my brother went to prom and I was like sad because I didn't have a date, so my parents took me to the movies. And my fucking mother took me, thanks mom, she took me to see Insidious, and I had fucking nightmares for weeks. I slept in my parents' room as like a 15-year-old or 14-year-old or something. I don't have the stomach for it.
It was the dumbest effing movie I had ever seen in my life. But I would not watch it. I didn't start watching horror movies till I was like, if I watched it when I was 15, I would have cried. Yeah.
I know, it was terrible.
Jump scares in it.
I like sat through the movie like this.
Yeah. Why would she?
I'm a baby.
Why can't we see Up or something like that?
I know, something happy-go-lucky, but oh no, we had to see it. Redirecting to Dawn Spirit. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about here that will probably be a topic of much debate is the Department of Child and Family Services in Florida. We touched on this a little bit in the tail end of your video, but I want to talk a little bit about the norms and the expectations for the Department of Child and Family Services. I'm just going to call it DCF from here on in because that's a mouthful and I'm real tired of saying it. In Florida, DCF is the department that's responsible for like child welfare and all of that stuff. And we, like I mentioned before, we talked about this in your video, but they actually investigated Dawn Spirit and their family like 18 times, all the way up until the actual day of the murder. They made a visit to Dawn Spirit's home. And so after the fact, there was a $750,000 settlement reached. Yeah, for 3 different agencies that, you know, were found to be negligent at the time.
I don't know who the money went to because Dawn killed them all.
I know, I had that thought too, which is like maybe kind of a morbid thing to say, but like I don't know who was really left to award the money to.
I am curious though, yeah, if like it maybe went to the grandmother or to
Jamie, I guess. But we talked a little bit about the like political climate and how that influences DCF. But I also wanted to talk about how the people who are responsible for these visits are like real human beings. And I think that people forget that. I looked it up actually, like the average salary. Hannah, just guess. Like, yeah, I know you have the notes, but just just guess what the average salary is.
And I'd have to look down, obviously, at my notes. So I actually forgot. So it's like, I'm guessing like $15 an hour in Florida, right?
Yep. Yeah. Pretty close. $20 an hour with a minimum requirement of a bachelor's degree.
Wow.
You can make more money at a fucking gas station.
$39,000 a year.
Yeah, $39,000 a year on average. And I also think it's important to talk about how these people have to be making these home visits in their own vehicle. Sometimes they're reimbursed for gas and for wear and tear on the car. Sometimes they're not. And so as far as I'm aware, Gilchrist County, which is where Dawn Spirit lived, was fairly rural and they had like a piece of land. We're not talking about like, you know, driving into the suburbs. We're talking about people who had to drive a fair distance and like make these visits with a person who's probably not super forthcoming with the information about the safety of his home and, you know, his whereabouts and what was going on there. There's a lot of barriers in place. And I think we have to own and acknowledge how the systemic barriers there are impacting the actual human beings who are trying to do the work. And so I think it's one of those areas, we talked about this before, the system at large is kind of like handicapping people who are like trying to do the right thing, but like there are limitations, you know, to what people can realistically accomplish.
By the sound of it for what they're doing, for the stressful that they're taking to try when they just want to help people.
Yeah, I mean, and that's something else that's important too, is that
like DSF is like can be at fault in a way where they should have done more, but the individual social workers are often not intending, and they also are doing the best they can with what they have. They don't usually have everything they need to do their best job.
Yeah, I think this is one of those areas where it's like the department and the system as a whole is very much at fault, but I do want to caution people in not necessarily pointing the finger at the actual social workers and people, because usually too, we're talking about people who are like in their early 20s. Like they probably just graduated. They're just looking for a goddamn job so they can pay for their studio apartment and like live their lives and like put food on the table.
And the type of person that wants to do that type of job is willing to take less money, because anybody who's willing to be a social worker or be, you know, do something that helps people or that's nonprofit, they're willing to do it for less money because they genuinely want to help people. And so they're going to also do a really, you know, the best job they can with what they have, even though they know that they're being super underpaid. And I also think, I'm guessing there's also a ton of protocols that we don't know about, that it's not like if they have a bad, you know, kind of a weird feeling, but there's no evidence in the home to suggest that they're correct. Like, what are they going to do? You know, they probably aren't allowed to do anything. So
Ooh, yes. Actually, that reminds me. That's something else that I wanted to mention too. I know it's common for people to say like, you know, it's clear that Dawn was like unfit to be a guardian or whatever. Unfortunately, though, if there's not clear physical evidence that there's abuse taking place, there's usually a limit to what people can do in terms of removing the children from the home. And so this is why things like sexual and emotional and mental abuse are difficult to substantiate, because if there's not physical proof that there's something abusive happening, unless a social worker can actually substantiate that this is happening, you might be removing a child from a home that actually is safe for no reason than someone said so.
To the child. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of what they do for animal services. Like if you report somebody's neglecting their dog, if they go in, the dog has food and water and there's no like obvious signs of something bad going on, they're not going to do anything about it for obvious reasons. And then when you close the door, the person might be yelling at their dog in a really mean way, even though they're not technically doing anything against the law, they're still being horrible.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate and like shitty, but it's like a hard thing in that there's not really a lot that you can do because
they can't just confiscate every child that they might have a bad feeling about, whether because it just can't be a mess.
Because that also opens the door for people to start making phone calls to DCF about their ex-girlfriend that they're really mad at, or their mother-in-law that they really don't like, really like fucking people's lives up for no reason. So it's kind of sketchy territory.
Hard. It's so interesting though, because there's no regulation.
Yes. And this is why I don't work with children, because it's sketchy, scary, confusing. So let's also talk really quickly then about the New York Times article, because we talked about this in your video. You intentionally excluded the New York Times article from your list of sources because of the pretty rampant sexism in there. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I noticed that too.
Yeah, and that just kind of reiterates what I said from the first part, but just that they focus so much on a lot of the articles, especially this article about how Sarah was a sex worker and Sarah did drugs and Sarah had all these past convictions. And we basically just said, what does that have to do with her being murdered? That's just a way to like blame the victim when she's never, as far as we know, done anything violent. Not that if she had been violent, that means she deserves to die or anything like that. I'm just saying that, like, if she had a violent past, I could understand why they would have mentioned it. It might have something to do with Dawn, but because she didn't, like, I just don't understand what any of her past things, I guess you could call them transgressions. I don't even think a lot of them are that. Like, sex work obviously isn't. What does that have to do with? Like, why do they even have to mention that? And it's just interesting because we see that all the time in true crime.
Is that something that you feel is like pretty common? Because like I said, obviously I am more like the mental health side of things than the true crime thing.
Not too bad, but like I said, I'll just kind of like either not include that part or just exclude that article altogether if I don't like what was written and everything. I mean, I think overall our society just kind of has a tendency to kind of look at, well, what did they do in the past that made them law? And they probably focused on Sarah because they obviously can't focus on the children because they're all like 11 years old and younger. So they just, I don't know, it's weird though, because what's the motivation for doing that? Because it's not like they'd have any reason to defend Dawn. So
it's odd too that they would do that in this case, especially because it's not like Dawn occupies any of the traditional markers of privilege that the media tends to defend. You know, like he wasn't an affluent white man of privilege who was like famous or a celebrity or something. It's weird that they would throw the victim under the bus in this case too. And
it's almost like they just wanted to make a longer article. So they just wanted to include more details in it, but didn't think about how anybody reading that is just going to be like, oh, well, this was Sarah got me into this, and that's just not fair. So this is why feminism helps everybody. Because
yes.
I find that in therapy, do you think that men are less likely to go to therapy?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes.
I mean, that could be a problem. Like that's, I think, a root of a lot of the problems too. And that was something else interesting. Do you know if men die by suicide more than women or vice versa?
Yes. So women are more likely to attempt suicide, but men are more likely to die by suicide because men are more likely to use more fatal or more immediate means, typically firearms. Women typically tend to use things like medication or pills, things that leave a longer window of time for intervention to take place. Obviously, things like firearms are pretty immediate. And so that's usually like the means that men gravitate towards.
I wonder why they use that method more than women.
I don't know. I mean, I think to a degree that's probably also rooted in sexism and like the sort of violent, like macho man thing. But it's an interesting thing that women are more likely to struggle with depression and mental illness and suicidal ideation and suicide attempts, but less likely to die by suicide.
Even though they're encouraged to share their feelings much. and men are not. Oh, how interesting.
Yeah, isn't that like kind of depressing and sad?
It's really depressing. Yeah.
On that like super uplifting and exciting note, I think that's just about everything.
I think so.
I want to say super huge thank you to you for being here. If you guys, like I said, if you're not subbed to Hannah, definitely go subscribe to her channel and go give her a like and a follow and all of the things. If you like the video, subscribe to the channel. I would say that we have content like this, but this is new. So we have other content. We have like therapist react style stuff. Go watch that and then share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow. Go follow Hannah and like her stuff. And I will see you guys next Saturday. Okay, bye. Thanks, Hannah. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.